Oh, we're live. Thank God that took forever. So, hello everyone, and welcome to the Series 3 finale, aka episode 18 of my live interview series. Now, if you're after just coming across from the Genealogy show, I'm sorry, but you're going to have to listen to me for another while. Same time, in the same evening. So, but nah, if you dealt with my presentation, you'll be fine with this, hopefully. So without dear God, without further ado, we'll get started. So tonight, the newest print of the Family History Federation and events manager. I think I got that right. Webinar manager of the One Place Studies Society. It's Janet Few.
Hello, nice to see you again.
Janet. Yeah, oh, I know. And especially for you, the fact that you're going to have to be talking to me. You didn't have to talk to me in the earlier one, but you still have to put up with me for a while, so it won't be too bad.
No, congratulations on your presentation. Right. It was excellent. Shook us all up a bit.
I know. Oh, I mean, initially I thought I was going to start a riot. To be very honest, I just thought, oh, there's going to be a load of people at me on Twitter now. I'm just thinking, will you ever be quiet? Was just kind of the original idea of things I thought I was going to get, but thankfully it did
in a
not
good
turn
way,
out
though.
to be that. So
a good
I'm
riot
elated.
would be an advantage. I think you probably need to start a bit of a riot.
Well, the only thing we're trying to start a riot about, not actually starting a riot for anyone that may watch, is about the student plan point presentation. But I'm not sure if that's going to happen. Probably won't, but I don't know. Maybe. So anyway, let's start because I'll bore people to death. So for people that might necessarily know you, Janet, could you start by introducing yourself?
Yes, well, I'm Janet Few. I'm a family historian, social historian, community historian. I'm based in the bottom left-hand corner of England in North Devon. I've been around for a very, very long time, and Daniel and I were just talking about young genealogists, and believe it or not, very many decades ago, I was that young genealogist. And I have been involved in various things for a very long time. I was on the executive committee of the Family History Federation for a while as their education liaison officer. And as Daniel mentioned, I've just recently been brought out from pasture in order to take on the honour of being the president, which is nothing to really write home about. I'm not the one who's doing all the work. That's the executive committee, but that's me. I also spend some time living in the 17th century. I disguise myself as Mistress Agnes, a lady of uncertain years who dispenses the odd herbal cure and tries to avoid being caught by the witch finder. Sometimes you'll find me writing the odd book or article, and that's me.
Fair enough. Now, like I said, you were that young genealogist that started out all those years ago. So what started it all off for you?
I come from a very, very small family. I've got no siblings, I've got no first cousins, and I've only got 6 second cousins, and they're all on the same side of the family. So I wouldn't say I was a lonely child, but I was very much alone and very conscious that I didn't have family. Equally, both my father and all 4 of my grandparents had died by the time I was 11, so I had even less family. And I think what really sparked it was when I was quite small. I don't know if they still do them now, but we used to have baby books where people would write, your parents would write in when you had your first haircut and when your tooth fell out and how tall you were when you were born and all that sort of thing. And there was a page in there for a family tree. And so my mother had written in, it only went back to great grandparents, just the names of my family tree. And I was fascinated by that, accompanied by the fact that because we've got such a small family, my mother had inherited the family photograph album, so virtually nothing for my father's family. But for my mother, I got pictures of many of my great-great-grandparents, which for someone of my generation is quite unusual. And so the combination, I think, of that family tree and those photographs really sparked my interest. So when my great aunt came to stay, who was sort of a surrogate grandmother really, we actually compiled my first family tree on the back of pieces of cardboard using copies of these photos, and that was my introduction. And although it was quite a few years before I could do serious research, because it wasn't so easy to do at that time, that was the beginning, and I kind of didn't look back really.
Yeah, and I mean, you probably, like, I can understand there might have been probably that there is some kind of desire to kind of see, right, surely, my immediate family might be quite small, but a kind of bigger family, there might be so like a lot more people, so like there to talk to and to find.
I still get really excited when I meet a third cousin, because that's my closest relatives practically. And in fact, by coincidence, I'm meeting a third cousin on Wednesday. We have met before. Strangely enough, we were at school together, at primary school together. At that time, we didn't know we were related. And it was only, I don't know, probably about 7 or 8 years ago, I discovered we were related. And then, of course, I hadn't had any contact with her since we were 11. But I did manage to get back in contact with her through a school reunion, and we are meeting on Wednesday. So we're both very excited.
I mean, that's the thing. And like, even for like people now, they're probably thinking, oh, probably not related to anyone, even though they could be like related to someone that's in the same school as them, like you said. And I mean, I think some people depend on what. So like, some schools may kind of, or some people in some schools may kind of think, oh my god, I can't believe I'm related to them. Let's not say that. I'm not. But then you might have some people that are completely either freaked out or related. So I guess I guess it depends.
I think it does. And I think what was more unusual about this, I mean, if I'd grown up in a small rural area and gone to a little tiny village primary school, because our family had been there for generations, it would be different. But we were living probably 5 or 6 miles apart. We were in South London. It was a few miles away from where our mutual ancestors had been based. So there were an awful lot of people who I might have gone to school with, other than being in that school at that time, and with her as well. And in the same class. So yes, it was a coincidence.
Well, it must have been really weird when you kind of thought, oh my god. Like when you immediately realized that, you were like, oh my god,
exactly. Yes. I mean, I knew my great grandmother's sister married someone with that surname, but it wasn't a particularly uncommon surname. And it never even occurred to me that, this would be the case. And when I started tracing forward, and I thought, oh, I wonder what happened to those children that she had. And I'm like, oh, goodness me, that's what happened. I know that name. So yeah, it was great.
Brilliant. So, what resources have you found most helpful in your research?
Oh my goodness. Well, of course, the resources available to us have always been there, but the availability of those resources has changed beyond all recognition in the 45 nearly years that I've been doing this. Because to begin with, it was very fragmentary what you could get hold of with any ease, because things were locked away and not catalogued, and certainly not available to us online. I mean, I'm fond of the family photos. I can't get away from that. And I'm very much into the context. So for me, it's not just the basic building block sources like censuses and certificates and parish registers, which we're all going to be using. It's those extra sources that help to fill out what our ancestors' lives would have been like and where they would have lived. So again, you mentioned one place studies. It's very much a combination of what's going on in the community, what's going on in that era, and what's going on with my ancestors. So people say, oh, I've got the biggest family tree in the world. It's got 50,000 people in it. And I'm like, so? Because the question then is, A, have you any possible conception that they're really correct? And the answer has to be no. And then you say, well, what do you know about them? Oh, well, they're called so-and-so and they were born so-and-so. And they're like, no, what do you know about the way in which they would live, or what their job was and what that job would have involved at that time in that place? So probably one of my current favourite sources, because I chop and change. I like the General View of Agriculture, which is a series of books that's not going to add a single name to your family tree. And they're published for the British Isles and 3 Irish counties. And I'm desperately trying to think which ones they are. I think they're Northern Irish. And it gives you the picture in a rural community. They're county by county between 1790 and 1810, according to when they were published. And you've got information about wages, you've got information about crops that were grown or livestock that were reared, the tools they would have used, and all sorts. It's absolutely invaluable for anyone who's got ancestors living in a rural community, because you think, oh, agricultural labour is kind of like boring, but they're not all the same. You're going to be completely different, like agricultural labour in Central Ireland to if you're an agricultural labourer in Kent or Yorkshire or the north of Scotland. So I like things like that. They fascinate me.
I like when you kind of said, with the kind of part with the tree about 50,000 people in it. I think, I can't remember who said it, but I remember one person saying to me that they had 100,000 people, and I almost fainted. I'm thinking, how? No. It's just how? And you could have 27th cousins 7 times removed to the husband of the wife, the husband of the second cousin, and it's just oh my god.
I mean,
it's as if you could go up to the poor person and say, "Hi, I'm your 27th cousin 6 times removed. So you're the husband of your 2 times great grandmother's wife, husband," and it's just hi.
So I know. There's clearly advantages to researching the wider family, but there's wider family and there's ridiculous, isn't there? It's
yeah. I have. I have nearly. I think I'm currently doing my working tree, and I think I'm slowly building it. It's just making me realize how big my family is in places. So currently I'm on nearly 400.
That's about right, because if you're doing it properly and you're doing it slowly and you're checking people before you blithely add them on, you're not going to have thousands of people overnight. I mean, I traditionally didn't keep my family tree online at all, and then I went to an offline program. And because I've done a DNA test, I have now got a tree on Ancestry. And I actually took that opportunity to, before I put anyone on, just to double check, because some of this was done 40 years ago when there was an awful lot less sources around, and it was much easier to wrongly add someone thinking, oh, well, it's going to be this one, because you hadn't got such complete indexing to check that there wasn't someone equally good just up the road. And there was only one 9 times great grandmother that got the chop as a result of that. But I've also put on my children's ancestry and the direct line for my grandchildren, and I still only got 2,500 or something. There are some more still to add, but nothing even approaching these 20, 30, 40,000. And I think probably if you've got a tree in those regions, a lot of serious genealogists aren't going to look very much at it. I mean, I try not to look at other people's trees anyway, as a matter of course. That's my really not what I would go to. But how can you take a tree like that seriously, particularly then when you look and see, A, there's no sources, and B, that people are giving birth 20 years after they died, or there's a range of children and one's born in Texas and the next one's born in Germany, and then we're in France, and you're thinking, I don't think so.
Yeah, I remembered one of mine. Excuse me. There was my tree on Ancestry. I have a subscription now, but for a long time I didn't. And it just kind of said, oh, tree hint for this guy, tree hint for that guy. And it was on my dad's side, where I don't have any cousins. I found more on my mother's side than I have my dad's. And I just thought, oh my god, I potentially have cousins. And one of them I email no, I can't remember. Anyway, correspondence was had, and the intendant, the person I was communicating with, cut off all contact. They did not reply to any. They did not talk to me anymore. So I thought, and like that was probably the closest one I had. So that was a bit of a sting. And then I have another tree with, who I always say is the unofficial one place study. I'm not kidding. They're like a tree with I don't know how many thousands of names, and I cannot find any connection. Or if I'm serious, it's just a forest. It's not. It's just ridiculous.
Oh yes, we've all seen those.
I'm thinking. So you're here. You can't see my finger. You're here, and I'm over there, way over there. How do you fit in? And I can never figure it out. It'd be nice if you could just kind of do view relationship between home person on tree to you.
Yes.
There's a suggestion for your ancestry. I'll read it after this.
Yeah, well, I mean, some software will allow, offline software will allow you to do that, but that's not the option there. So
yeah, it would be nice because I wonder if it would be like one of those things where it's like the 27th and 6 times removed.
Yes.
I just need to know them or not. So yeah. Anyway, what projects or ventures are you currently pursuing?
Well, having finished writing a second historical novel last year, which is based on a true story, it's based on family history research, and it even has a young genealogist in it. Although it's set in the 17th century, it's got a 21st century thread with a young genealogist. And that was, I mean, you talk about taking risks. That was a risk because I had to make this person 16 for the benefit of the plot. And as soon as you make a hero or a heroine 16, everyone identifies it as a young adult book. And it's not meant to be a young adult book. It's meant to be a book. I probably wouldn't recommend anyone under the age of about 15 reading it because it's quite dark. So I finished that, and then I was playing around with ideas about where to go next. Well, should I write another novel? Because the novels really came when I couldn't think of another non-fiction family social history book to write. And I did have some ideas, but they just weren't quite going where I wanted to go. So I went back to what I was going to do before I wrote the first novel, which was do a university course. So I'm starting in the University College of Dublin in September, online as a remote student, doing experimental archaeology and material culture, because that fits in very nicely with me pretending to live in the 17th century. At least I hope it will. So I'm looking forward to that. Research-wise, I'm very much into, at the moment, doing things for various societies. I kind of took the Zoom baton fairly early, so I'm chairman of Devon Family History Society, and we do a lot online. Not just me, it's a team of us that do that, and also the one place studies that you mentioned. Still have some really tough brick walls, which I hope one day I can demolish. I really don't know how or why or when, but I still keep going back to them and having another look. So I will be continuing to revisit those and writing up some more branches and inspiring my grandchildren, because they're 7, 7 and 5, and I've been, well, ever since they were born, I've been sort of drip feeding them all this subliminal family history message, and I thought, well, they like, well, exactly. I mean, they like sticker books, you see. So I thought, well, I could create a family history sticker book. So I've got a photo album with the slot-in pages, and I've got some photos, and I've got little bits of write-up about some of the family. It goes back to their 4 times great-grandparents. There's a few gaps. And so they've had, I think, 3 lots now of cards to put in their sticker album. But of course, it needs to be for all their lines. And so although I'd got a lot on my own, quite a bit on my late husband's, nothing on their father's side of the family, which is no relation to me whatsoever. So I've had to kind of do a little bit on there. And of course, far fewer photos. It's very one quarter sided, really, as far as photos are going. So we're having to substitute photos of places for photos of people, but we're getting there. And then they have little challenges to do to go with the tasks. So, all these people married in 1851. Can you find out what was happening in 1851? And they've got, I think it's a Dorling Kindersley book, which is what happened in this year, a children's book, although I use it as an adult. And so you can find out famous things that were going on or notable things that were going on in a particular year. So apparently, because I never looked for the answers. One year I picked up, my daughter said, couldn't you have found a year when there was something that wasn't morbid going on? I can't remember what the year was, but I said, sorry, I didn't look to see what the answers were going to be. But apparently it was all doom and gloom. So yeah, lots of projects.
And I think that's probably the way that you're going to get kind of people into it, is kind of, like you said, drip feed kind of family history stuff in. And going back to our conversation of, seeing if you could get the relationship from the home person to you, Helen Shields popped a comment. Hello, Helen. And eventually it'll pop in, like through lines for non-DNA trees. And essentially, yes, that would be nice. Anywho, so is there anything that you now know that you wish you knew when you started?
I think I wish I'd known before I made career choices that this could be a career. And so I went into the education sort of sector a little bit. Wasn't terribly comfortable there, had children, did other things. So I think possibly I might have become an archivist or something like that if I'd known and realised that there was a career path to have out of that. I mean, I went to a reasonably enlightened school, considering this is the 1970s. So it wasn't one of those schools where, oh, you're a girl, you need to be a secretary or a nurse, or possibly a teacher if you're really bright. There was quite a range of careers advice, and the expectation was that one would go to university, which again wasn't universal at that point, particularly for females. But there was never really any suggestion that I could do anything with the history that I loved. So I think that would have been useful to know that. But yes, and also maybe that things were going to get a lot easier and quicker to find things than they were to begin with, because it was such a slow, drawn out process that you went to a record office, you found some material, you went home, you couldn't get back to that record office for 6 months or a year to build on what you'd found the first time. So everything was much, much slower. But then we knew no different. So if we went back to that now, everyone would be appalled. But in fact, at the time, that was what you did and how you did it, and we accepted it.
Yeah, I think you're definitely, in the sense that, like you said, so much has changed kind of from the start of kind of when genealogy started to gain traction and more things slowly started to become available compared to then when there wasn't really much availability. So yeah, it's great how much it's come, and it'll probably evolve more in days to go. Years. Immediate thought was days. God, I'm hopeful.
If only. If only. Yes.
Oh dear. What aspect of genealogy do you love the most? So, like, looking at records, seeing photos, finding stories.
I like trying to understand the people. I like trying to get under the skin of those people and trying to work out why they behaved in the way they did. And that was very much something that motivated the 2 novels I did. This is a really weird scenario. I think I'll write a book about this. And then it was more, actually, what I want to know is what made this incident happen. What was all the backstory that brought those people to that situation at that particular point in the time? And I said they're both based on real ancestral stories, although they're not my own. But I do that in my own family history. I try and think, well, okay, they moved from this place to that place. What on earth would have made them do that? I mean, you can never be sure, of course, but you can try and come up with some kind of sensible suggestion as to what was going on and why it was going on and things like that. So yeah, I like understanding the people. I think that's my favorite bit.
Fair enough. So, what is an interesting story or event that you've discovered in your family history?
I think probably something that makes you think, oh, that's a bit spooky, is that I grew up in South London. I spent a lot of my adult life on the Isle of Wight, but I spent 3 years in Aylesbury in Buckinghamshire, or just outside Aylesbury in Buckinghamshire. And it was fairly early on in my family history career. I've been researching for about 4 or 5 years at that point, but I got a young child, so obviously what I was able to do was pretty limited at that point. So I lived there. I left there and went back to the Isle of Wight, and then discovered that I'd been living in the same road as my great-great-grandmother. And that was a bit like, whoa, that's a little bit spooky. And I had no knowledge at that point that there was even a connection to that county, let alone that village or that road. Not in the same house, because it was a 1930s house, but it could have been pretty much the same location. So that was really strange.
I think it would have just added that icing on the cake. You were the same house.
Yes.
It was just like you were the same village, the same country. Sorry, bit extreme. And then I think we kind of would have just thought, okay, this is weird. If it was just the exact house. And were you far from the house? Like, if you don't remember, far from the house?
Sorry?
Where your great-great-grandmother...
Well, I don't know exactly. All I know is the name of the road. All I know is the name of the road, because obviously I'm looking at her in the 1851, 1861 censuses, because she lived there as a child. And so I just know the name of the road. There were no precise addresses, and anyway, the houses would have been demolished since then to be rebuilt. So yeah, I don't know. It's not a particularly long road, so it can't have been far away, but whoa, it was strange.
Yeah. So, what type of record do you like most and why?
I like the ones that give you a little bit of meat rather than just a bald fact. So, I mean, newspapers are great because you've got proper stories in there, and maybe a will, because that will give you more information than just a vital event. So that's the sort of record that I really like. And like I said before, the ones that give you some context. So I like the Valuation Office survey, which is 1910 in Britain. And they give little descriptions of the house. So that's the sort of thing I like.
Fair enough. So, for anyone watching, we're almost at the end of the end of my questions for Janet. So, if you have anyone get in, please do. Just type them in the comments. Hopefully, there should be enough cards. I have no idea if there's a limit, but do your best. So, what does genealogy?
It's what I do all day, every day. I mean, I sort of semi-retired when I moved to Devon. So much for that idea. And I always say that either I work for about 100 hours a week, or I just spend my whole life enjoying myself. So I kind of live and breathe it, really. There is nothing else. And so yes, it's all the slightly broader history that goes under it, I think, too.
And what advice? Now that's ironic, because you just listened to me for 35 odd minutes ranting on about things. So, what advice would you give to a young person starting out in genealogy?
Oh, stick at it, and enjoy it, because don't make it into a chore. And if you're still at school, don't make it into like more homework. It's supposed to be fun. And I think, picking up on that theme of how those of us who are not quite so young anymore can be a bit more accommodating and welcoming. And I think that's important because there's this attitude out there. And it's still quite strong. And it's been like that, ever since I became involved in societies in the early 80s, because there weren't many societies. I think 1977 was really the year when the societies began forming. And it's all, well, we can't expect anyone to take an interest in family history until they retire. That was the sort of expectation, that it was a hobby for retired people. And there's very much this defeatist attitude that, well, we've never been able to get young people interested. And again, you say, well, I can't get my children interested. I can't get my grandchildren interested. And I'm like, well, have you actually tried? And I think what people are doing, they're sitting back, they're carrying on doing what they've always done, which really appeals to retired people. And they're suddenly expecting, by doing the same thing 20 years down the line, that magically suddenly it's going to be relevant and appealing to young people. And clearly it's not. It's not worked before. You don't just keep on doing the same thing and thinking it's going to work. And we've got to change that round and think, well, how can we take family history in its really broad sense? I think that's probably what you have to do, to younger people at the position where they're at and where they're going to find it engaging and relevant. And we're not very good at doing that. And I think we need to be an awful lot better. And I've long been a champion of involving young people. I've done talks on it. I've written a booklet on it and so on, and about how we can engage people. But until you engage young people with the sense of the past, you can't engage them with family history. It doesn't just sort of drop in as if from nowhere. There's got to be a basis. And that can start from infancy, really. And I think by looking at that, I think that and trying to see it from a young person's perspective rather than trying to make the young people see it from an older person's perspective, that's the way we can be most helpful and welcoming. And I know we were talking in the Twitter storm after your presentation that family history societies, and this is my Federation presidential hat to a certain extent, we need to be much more accommodating for younger people and much more welcoming. And I think the fact that we've been forced to take our meetings online, whereas previously they would have been in a hall in an evening, and quite intimidating for a younger person to walk in to, let's be blunt, a room full of old people, because that's what it would have been. And as you pointed out, it's very hard to stand up and be counted if you're the only one and just be that first little snowflake that turns into a snowball. So we need to really make much more effort. I know Devon Family History Society that I'm involved with have the Acorn Club, which is designed for young people. We seem to really be aiming that a little bit more at preteens, although it's not necessarily intended to be, but that's kind of historically how it's evolved. I think I'm right in saying Manchester and Lancashire Family History Society have a young person's section, but we're kind of still going through the motions a little bit. We need to be an awful lot more proactive with this, I think, and really get out there and say, look, you're welcome, come and join us, and come on our committees and come and be advisors and all that sort of thing. So
and I think it like I don't know what else to say. You practically just nailed it on the head right there, Janet. Now, before I continue on, a comment just came in with regards to jobs. So compared with what job you would have gone with. So if you knew that it was here, agree with the career choices back in the day: secretary, teacher, waitress, or nurse. Today, I would jump at the opportunity to be an archivist or forensic genealogist.
Oh, never too late.
Yeah, I think
never too late for a career change.
Definitely. And I mean, I guess if you're enthusiastic about it, do it. I'd say that's the only way to put it. And this is gonna, So this is kind of, you've probably practically answered this. Is kind of now with times changing and more young people getting into genealogy. Do you think that there's a sufficient outlet for young genealogists to connect and collaborate with others their own age?
I mean, I think it helps because you have got that social media platform, so you're not fishing in a very small pool of just your friends and schoolmates as you would have been back in the day. So you are able to make connections, as you have done, with other young genealogists who are geographically on the other side of the world from you, but you can still offer each other support and encouragement and so on. I don't think there's ever enough, but I think we are moving very, very slowly, one step at a time, in the right sort of direction with that. I can see Helen has a question. Hello, Helen. Helen's one of my acquaintances and friends from online genealogy. So, well, I probably shouldn't say, should I? It's not me. I can say. Did I base them myself?
No. A really bad
the answer is it's not me. It's not me. I mean, some people think it's my daughter because the name is the same as one of my daughters. And there are aspects of the young girl's called Martha. There are aspects of Martha's history that have some resonance with my younger daughter. But no, it's a conglomeration of young people that I've associated with over the years, I think, really is probably the best way to describe it. It was actually quite, because it's written from her point of view about a quarter of the book, and I had to think not only what the heck's it like to be 16, and I didn't have too much trouble with that because I'm still waiting to grow up, really, but it's what's it like to be 16 now. I could do what's it like to be 16 in the 1970s quite nicely, but what's it like to be 16 now, I had to think a little bit about and see. And I think one of your Hidden Branch colleagues currently has a copy to review, so she can tell me if I got it right or not.
Yes, Emmy does. So yeah, hopefully that will be going up soon. I will work that out. Bear with us. So
well, no rush.
I don't think there's many. I know. I don't see any more questions at the moment. So I'd say with that would be a good end. So thank you so much, Janet, for coming on. You've been a lovely, and thanks for tuning in. This is, if you want to accumulate all of the episodes, this is technically episode 30. So, and the reason why I've done an all series is because I may not necessarily be able to do it next year because busy year at school and all, it's boring stuff. So I may do another one yet during the school yet, but as it stands at the moment, this is kind of making up for next year. So if you haven't already, do catch up on. There's I don't know how many hours of footage you can watch, and it's good if you want to genealogy themed entertainment that does Netflix or Disney Plus or whatever is happening now. So and I'm glad that you've all enjoyed episodes and you've all learned something new with each one. And yeah, it's one of the things that I think has gone quite well. So I'd say, I won't say until the next week because there isn't one next week. So until the next time that there is one, see you all next time. So bye.